This is going to be a quick how-to video on installing rollover protection bar lights or rear work lights on a John Deere 2032R or 2038R. I went through a lot of different videos and a lot of guys were saying to go in here and grab your power from right there inside of the dash and run it back underneath the floor and come over to a switch panel over there and add your switches and hide your relays down in here, and then to run up the rollover protection bar and out. And there was countless videos on that. After looking at the wiring diagrams and the fuse box assemblies, I realized John Deere was so gracious that in an effort to sell an aftermarket accessory of their premium rear work light, which is not even as cool as what we got here, they added a provision into the wiring. If you take your rear left wheel off, right down here at the axle, where the wiring goes into the bottom of the rollover protection, what you'll end up having, and I've already got mine hooked up, and mine's right here now, going up there, but there's a purple and a black wire with butt connectors on them that are just taped here and terminated that don't go to anything. The way that wiring circuit works is when you turn on your headlights, your work lights up here, the power goes through that switch down to the work light fuse, which is inside that fuse box, and then it comes back and it powers these rear fender lights. What gets confusing in the fuse diagrams, in the fuses and so on, is there's also a second circuit that's dedicated at 20 amps for rear work lights. And what happens is after the power gets up to these fender lights, there's a lead that goes down, and I've already put this back together, but underneath of here, there's another fuse box with a relay in it and a 20 amp fuse. The fog lights here, the work lights here, are acting as the switching power for the relay that has a separate 20 amp power supply in here that is then wired from this fuse block down to here where those two terminated wires are. It's a purple wire and a black wire with butt connectors on the end of them. The purple wire is your hot, the black wire is your ground. So the way that it works now is I've wired these into my rollover protection lights that I've added. They're just 20-inch, 420 watt according to Nightlight light bars, one on the front and one on the back. Now don't be confused with 420 watts because they are not pulling 63 amps. In fact, I tested them, and these Nightlight 420 watt LED light bars pull 3.1 amps each. So I'm pulling 6.2 amps through that 20 amp circuit with its own dedicated power supply. Now, if you want to be able to control those completely independently and separately from your front lights, from these lights, you're going to have to do something different. But the way it works now is when you turn on the key, turn on your headlights, you just got headlights. When you go to work lights, you've got your fender lights, and we've got our lights up here that are giving us extra light. So you're not controlling this independently from the factory installed switches, which I think is much cleaner, that it's working the way that it was designed from the factory, utilizing that 20 amp circuit down there to run up the rollover protection and power those. So I hope that helps. It utilizes the factory key switches, the factory wiring. It's working the way they designed it by John Deere engineers, and it does what it's supposed to. For anybody wondering how the lights are routed, I ran my wire. I'm going to have this tucked up in here like that. It goes up the rollover protection bar. It comes out. I drilled a 1/2-inch hole here, and somebody might judge me for this, but I ran my wires. They're in loom, but I put some silicone in there to keep them from wiggling around and chafing. They come up over the hinge point so that if this pin here is out of this position, it can still go through this one, or if it's folded all the way down, these will just fold and be tucked up underneath of here. But then I go back into here and I ran inside the tube, and if you can see there, I drilled a 1/2-inch hole, same thing. That's where that connection point is. And over there, 1/2-inch hole where that connection point is. And that's how it works. So again, I'll just touch base back on how the circuit works. When you turn your key on, you send power to this headlight and work light switch. When you turn this to the work light position, that power is then routed down and through a 15 amp fuse in here that then runs back inside here, splits off. One side hits that light, one side hits that light, and there's a third wire that runs over and hits the switching side of a relay in here to trigger a dedicated 20 amp circuit for rear lights. And so there's a 20 amp fuse in there. I believe it's labeled F17. It says rear work lights. There's nothing pulling from that circuit right now from the factory. So you've got 20 amps there. That off that 20 amp fuse, the wire runs down, comes out of this wire loom right here, and is folded back and taped to this with 2 butt connectors. It's a purple and a black. Purple is positive, black is negative. Hope that helps somebody, and have a good one.